Most people think survival is a personal inventory problem. Get enough supplies, get enough land, get enough guns, stack enough freeze-dried meals in a basement that you can pretend the supply chain never mattered. It's a satisfying logic. It's also wrong. Here's what every documented collapse shows. The people who inherited what came next weren't the ones with the most stockpiled. They were the ones who controlled something the community couldn't function without. A location isn't a survival strategy. A location is an address. What you need inside that address. What actually separates the people who survive from the people who become indispensable is function, capacity. A building that does something the surrounding community desperately needs and cannot easily replicate. We analyzed every grid failure, every supply chain breakdown, every prolonged collapse on record. The same pattern, every time. 7 buildings passed the test. Here's how we found them. Picture the prepared American. Gun safe in the garage. Basement stacked with enough freeze-dried protein to outlast a decade of bad decisions. Bug-out bag by the back door. Map folded to the right quadrant. 2 weeks of antibiotics in a waterproof case. It's a satisfying image. It's also the wrong frame entirely. Not because any of those things are useless. They're not. But they share the same fatal architecture. They are personal solutions to a community problem. And in every documented collapse on record, Yugoslavia in the 90s, Argentina in 2001, Venezuela across the last decade, personal solutions ran a predictable course. They lasted 6 months, sometimes a year. Then they ran out. And when they ran out, the people who had staked everything on their own pile discovered that the world had reorganized itself around something they hadn't prepared for. What actually survived those collapses wasn't the largest stockpile. It was function. The ability to do something the surrounding community needed and could not easily do without. A blacksmith, a mill, a clinic. A place that produced or processed something so fundamental that the community had a vested interest in keeping it, and the people inside it. Operational. Here's the distinction that changes everything. A stockpile is a fixed quantity. No matter how large it is, it counts down from the moment the supply chain breaks. 3 years of rice becomes 2 years, becomes 6 months, becomes nothing. A building with ongoing production capacity doesn't count down. It counts forward. Every day it operates. It generates something new. Flour from grain, power from water, medical care from skill and equipment. The output compounds. The stockpile only depletes. This is not a radical idea. It is what every functioning economy in human history has understood. But most survival planning is built around the psychology of hoarding, not the logic of production. Most people spend their preparation budget on things that will eventually be gone. The smarter play, the play that the historical record consistently rewards, is to position yourself inside something that keeps generating value after the personal inventory runs out. A year of rice in your basement is a countdown clock. A building that produces something is a printing press. So what kind of building actually qualifies? That's where the methodology comes in. Before we get to the 7 buildings, you need to understand how we graded them. Because a list without a methodology is just trivia. And trivia won't tell you which building in your city is worth positioning inside and which one just looks useful until it isn't. We built a 3-part test. Every building either passes all 3 layers or it doesn't make the list. No partial credit. No rounding up because something looks impressive or feels intuitively right. The math either works or it doesn't. The first layer is ongoing production capacity. Does this building make or process something? Not store it. Not distribute it. Actually create it repeatedly in a way that produces new value every time it runs. Storage is a countdown. Production is a multiplier. The first question we ask about any building is which side of that line it falls on. The second layer is infrastructure independence. Can this building do its job if the grid never comes back? Not for a day. Not for a week. Indefinitely. Most commercial buildings in America were designed for a world of cheap, reliable electricity. Pull that electricity, and they become very expensive, very useless boxes. The buildings on our list were either built to operate without grid dependency, can be converted to manual operation, or run on inputs that exist locally and don't require a functioning supply chain. If a building fails the moment the power goes out, it doesn't make the test. The third layer is community leverage. Does controlling or working inside this building give you something the surrounding community needs badly enough that they have a vested interest in your continued operation? This is the multiplier on top of the multiplier. Production capacity keeps you alive. Infrastructure independence keeps you running. Community leverage makes you indispensable. Indispensable is the highest strategic position available in a collapsed economy. We graded every building across all 3 layers. Scores run from A+ to C. AC means it passes but barely. Useful, not exceptional. An A+ means it passes every layer at maximum and historically creates the kind of position that forms the nucleus of whatever economy comes next. 7 buildings cleared the bar. Most buildings in your city didn't, and at least one of the 7 is probably within a few miles of where you're sitting right now. The grid goes down. Diesel distribution stalls within 48 hours because dispatch systems and electronic payment infrastructure fail simultaneously. Municipal water pressure drops within 72 hours because the pumps that move water through city infrastructure require continuous electrical input. At that point, most buildings in your city become exactly what they look like from the outside: expensive square footage that no longer does anything. But some buildings keep working, not because they're remarkable, because they were engineered for a different set of assumptions, or because their core function never required the grid to begin with. Ongoing production capacity in a grid-down scenario is not about what a building currently contains. It's about what it can continue to do after the supply chain that stocked it has stopped running. A grocery store has substantial inventory on day 1. It also has 0 production capacity. Once the shelves empty, the building is a box. A warehouse is the same problem at larger scale. A regional distribution center, a big box retailer, a logistics hub, all of them are downstream of a supply chain that has already broken. Their apparent value is entirely borrowed from a system that no longer functions. Infrastructure independence is the filter that reveals this. The test is simple. Remove grid power. Remove municipal services. Remove electronic payment. Remove resupply. What does the building still do? For most commercial real estate in America, the honest answer is nothing useful. The average commercial building draws between 50 and 200 kilowatts just to maintain basic operational temperature. Without power, it becomes uninhabitable before it becomes useless. Without resupply, whatever inventory made it valuable empties in days. The buildings that pass this layer share a structural characteristic. Their core function either predates electrical infrastructure, can be converted to mechanical or manual operation, or runs on locally available inputs that exist regardless of whether anyone is paying the utility bill. Gravity does the work. Human labor does the work. Locally sourced fuel does the work. The grid's absence changes the difficulty, not the fundamental output. These buildings are not rare in principle. In practice, they are hiding in plain sight in every mid-size American city, overlooked precisely because they look boring and generate no drama in normal times. That's exactly why they're still standing when everything else goes quiet. In every documented collapse, 2 types of people ended up controlling the buildings that mattered. The first type locked the door. They secured their inventory, restricted access, and treated every outsider as a potential threat. For a few weeks, sometimes longer, this appeared to be working. Then the stockpile shrank. Then it ran out. A locked building with finite resources is a stockpile with walls. Walls don't change the math. The second type opened the door with terms, not generously, strategically. Here is what this building produces. Here is what I need in exchange. They created dependency. They positioned themselves at the center of a network. And the network developed a vested interest in keeping them operational, supplied, and protected. These are the people the historical record consistently shows building whatever came after. Community leverage is the formal name for what those people understood intuitively. The building's function creates a specific kind of dependency. The surrounding community needs what it produces badly enough to protect it, supply it, and negotiate for access to it. The leverage test is a single question. Can the people around you replicate what this building does without traveling past the point of practical return? If the answer is no, that no is your leverage. The distinction between high and low leverage has nothing to do with size or normal times commercial value. A furniture manufacturer is a legitimate business. In a grid-down scenario, furniture is not a primary need. A small grain mill is a modest operation by any peacetime standard. In the same scenario, flour is everything. Leverage is determined entirely by what people need when they can no longer get it anywhere else. There is a dark corollary worth stating directly. High leverage attracts attention. A building that becomes the center of a local food economy or a water distribution network is also a target. This is why the buildings on our list score well on community integration, not just production and independence. Isolated leverage is a liability. Leverage embedded inside a community with the capacity and motivation to defend it is the closest thing to a durable position that a collapsed economy can offer. A building that passes all three criteria isn't just a survival asset. It's a currency printing machine in a world that's forgotten what currency means. First tier, the reliable backups. Buildings 7 through 5 pass all three criteria with solid grades, but each has at least one asterisk. Not deal breakers. Factors you need to go in knowing. Building 7 is the agricultural feed and supply store. These are the buildings most people drive past without registering. The rural and semi-rural supply chains that consolidate grain, seed, animal feed, and basic farming inputs into one location. Not food itself, but everything required to produce it. Infrastructure independence is high. No cold chain, no electrical dependency for storage. Distribution is manually operable. Community leverage is solid because the surrounding agricultural community needs these inputs before any food production cycle can begin. The catch is the most significant one on this list. Feed stores are entirely downstream of a supply chain that has already broken. Once the existing inventory is depleted and no resupply arrives, the leverage disappears with the last bag on the shelf. Score. B. Building 6 is the self-storage facility with solar installation. In the last decade, a significant number of commercial storage facilities have been retrofitted with solar arrays and battery banks to reduce operating costs. That decision, made for mundane financial reasons, produces something rare in a grid-down scenario. A functioning power node in a landscape that has gone dark. Secure storage combined with reliable electricity is a combination almost nobody else will have. Community leverage is strong. Power access becomes an immediate post-collapse currency. The catch is physical design. Self-storage facilities were built for convenience, not defense. Large perimeter, multiple access points, no natural choke points. Score, B+. Building 5 is the regional auto parts warehouse. In the early to mid-collapse phase, when fuel still exists but supply chains have already broken, mechanical components become the currency that keeps everything else operational. Engine parts, brake systems, hydraulic components, hand tools, indispensable to anyone maintaining vehicles, generators, or farm equipment. Infrastructure independence is complete. Nothing requires electricity to store or distribute. The inventory requires no refrigeration, no climate control, no active management to preserve its value. Community leverage is very high in the short to medium term. The catch: leverage narrows as the fuel window closes and the operational vehicle count declines. Score: B+. Those 3 have asterisks. The next 4 don't have any. I know what some of you are thinking. Why buildings at all? Why not just buy land, get a few acres outside the city, grow your own food, build your own perimeter? Total independence from anyone else's decisions. It's a satisfying logic. It's also why isolated homesteaders in every documented collapse got picked off first. A homestead requires skills most people haven't built, preparation most people haven't done, and a defensive capacity that a small group cannot sustain under real pressure. You can hold a position against opportunistic threats. You cannot hold it against a coordinated group that has identified your location as the most valuable target in a 20-mile radius and has both the numbers and the patience to take it. Every prolonged collapse on record confirms the same outcome for isolated assets. The timeline varies. The result doesn't. The buildings on this list operate on different logic. You don't need to own them. You need to work within them, trade access to them, or become the person the surrounding community associates with their function. That positioning is the protection. A grain mill embedded in a small city has an entire community with a vested interest in its continued operation. It doesn't defend itself alone. It's defended by its own indispensability. Isolated assets become targets. Assets embedded in functional communities become institutions. Institutions get defended. The people at the center of them survive the transition. A compound in the desert is a statement that humanity is over and you're prolonging the inevitable. A functional building inside a living community is a statement that it continues, and you've positioned yourself at the center of what comes next. Your choice, but choose before you need to. Buildings 4 through 1, second tier. These 2 pass every layer with high marks. The catches are minor. Building 4 is the private property with a fully independent well system, specifically, properties equipped with hand pump or gravity-fed backup capability that functions without electrical input. Municipal water fails within 72 hours of a grid-down event. Most Americans have no functioning alternative. At that point, clean water access isn't a comfort or a convenience. It is your entire negotiating position with everyone within range of your location. Infrastructure independence is near total. A manual pump runs on physics, not electricity. A gravity-fed cistern requires no infrastructure at all. Community leverage is maximum. The catch is visibility. A working water source is identifiable, which creates defensive requirements that cannot be met alone. The solution is coalition rather than isolation, which the community leverage layer already demands. Score: A-. Building 3 is the commercial grain mill. It does something that sounds straightforward and is genuinely difficult to replicate at scale: converts raw grain into usable flour. In any agricultural region, grain remains relatively accessible even when supply chains collapse. Farms produce it, silos store it, fields still grow it. The ability to process that grain into something a family can cook is not accessible. Most people cannot mill grain without powered equipment. A commercial mill with mechanical or water-powered fallback capability sits between the farmers who grow and the population that needs to eat, which is one of the strongest positional advantages available in a regional collapse economy. Infrastructure independence is high for mills with mechanical alternatives. Community leverage is very high. The catch: skilled operation is required, and proximity to agricultural supply matters. Score: A-. 2 left. One of them is the most overlooked building in America. The other might already exist in your town. Building 2 is the independent medical clinic with manual surgical capacity. Trauma care. Wound management. Infection control. Surgical intervention without hospital infrastructure or reliable power. In a collapse scenario, injury and illness don't decrease. They increase sharply. The supply of people equipped to treat them decreases at the same rate. Infrastructure independence is high. Basic stabilization, wound closure, and surgical procedures require skill and instruments, not electricity. Community leverage is absolute. The person who can set a bone, manage an infection, or close a serious laceration becomes structurally non-negotiable to any community that intends to survive intact. No organized group will allow that person to go unprotected if they have any choice in the matter. The catch: the building without the practitioner is a room full of equipment. The skills are the asset. The building amplifies them. Score: A. Building 1 is the local feed and seed cooperative with working grinding and storage capacity. Not glamorous. The single most leveraged position available in a collapse economy. A feed and seed cooperative controls the input layer of food production. Seed stock. Grain storage. The processing capacity that converts raw harvest into something a family can cook. Every farm within 50 miles depends on what this building holds before a growing season begins. Without it, regional food production stalls at the starting line. Infrastructure independence is near total. These facilities were built for rural operation with minimal grid dependency. Community leverage is maximum. You sit upstream of every calorie produced in your region. The catch: rural location requires coalition defense. Score: A+. A building is not a survival strategy. It's a foundation. Run the 3 criteria audit on every building within 5 miles of where you live. Find which ones you can access. Not own, access. Build a relationship with whoever operates them now. Acquire the skills that make you valuable inside them. 7 buildings. 3 criteria.